Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Dori Desautel Broudy with me. Dori is the founder of the Gallery of Good, a collection of artwork in print, canvas, acrylic, home decor, and apparel. A portions of the proceeds from every sale is dedicated to a charity. Dori's work is sold at nearly 20 locations throughout the U.S., including the Four Seasons Hotel in Boyds, Philadelphia. Dori was also a former lawyer for over 10 years. Dori, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Of course. Thankful to have you on. So, for those of us that don't know you as well, can you kind of give an introduction on your background, where you grew up, your
Yes,
family situation, what type of kid you were?
absolutely. I'm a New England girl who spent most of her childhood in Maine and Rhode Island. I went to college at Colby, further up north. Worked my way down the East Coast, attended law school in Boston at Suffolk University, was a litigator for the better part of 10 years. Worked in New England, worked in Manhattan, and finally in Philadelphia, where I met my husband. And he's all Philly. So we don't have any issues with respect to competing sports interests unless there's a World Series or a Super Bowl. So we're pretty good.
Yeah.
And I've been in Philadelphia for with one respite in Hartford when my husband got a job transfer for the better part of almost 20 years. We've got 3 kids who are 13, 11, and 9. And my 2 canine kids are horses slash, Bernese mountain dogs. They're massive. So we've been very busy for a long, long time navigating all of this. But when I grew up, I always wanted to be an attorney. And at the same time, art was a hobby for me. It wasn't something that I formalized in the way of classes outside of school. I was very committed to soccer as well. So that really predetermined where I was going to be going to school and what my focus in large part was in college. I've never really stopped playing soccer with the exception of when I was pregnant, and now coach my youngest team full of 8 and 9-year-old boys, which is interesting. But art is something that, as I said, I've always done as a hobby. It started with when I was very young, I would narrate stories and illustrate at the same time. I see that happening with all 3 of my kids. And it was about 4 years ago, I'm in year 4 now of the Gallery of Good, when my children were all demonstrating, independent of my interest, were all demonstrating a strong interest in art. And there were sort of a few different things that worked together to lead to the decision to form the Gallery of Good. I had, after 10 years of practicing law, the very good fortune to decide whether I was going to be home full time or continuing to work outside the home, and opted to be home full time with my kids. So my last day as an attorney was about 2 weeks before my due date with my now 13-year-old. And I knew that if I was going to return to something outside the home, it was really going to have to focus on a couple of different things. One, it was something I was going to have to be able to involve my children in, as opposed to do something in lieu of spending time with my kids. It was going to have to set a positive example, and it was going to have to help as many people as possible. And so when I decided to start the Gallery of Good, it was right after, not this former presidential election, but the one before that. And whatever your political convictions may be, I think it's been disheartening to see how isolated people have become in their opinions, positioning, willingness to have open dialogue. And so that was very disheartening for me. At the time, we also happened to be living right in the heart of the city of brotherly love. We were literally around the corner from the Betsy Ross House, the Constitution Center, Independence Hall. So these places that symbolically have always meant for me as a lawyer and as a mother and as a person, I think in general, just places where people of different opinions work together to actually make productive things happen. And so spending a lot of time in that area just by virtue of living there, wanting to think of things that would be unifying in nature, and having a couple of people, more than a couple of people, but I don't want to sound like I'm bragging too much, comment on my artwork, which I was really finding to be very cathartic, was doing it with my kids. I decided to start the Gallery of Good, and hoping that I would create pieces that were unifying in nature, where, I mean, you'll see from my subject matter, it's sort of universally pleasing objects and subject matter. And the idea being I can incorporate some of the things that I think I illustrate best, and have people from a wide variety of backgrounds observe, and despite their socioeconomic, geographic, religious, what have you backgrounds, they could all look and agree. Hopefully they're not agreeing that it's rotten. Hopefully they're all agreeing that they enjoy it, but that they could all find themselves in a similar position where they're all looking at something and saying, yeah, that's really beautiful, or that speaks to me in some way. So I guess that's my long-winded way of giving you a little bit of background about me. And, soccer is very much a big part of my life, but I think being part of a team has defined who I am from very early childhood, and something that my kids are benefiting from. And I certainly employ that in my business practices as well. Every vendor that I work with is a part of the team.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you talked about soccer and Colby College. I'm curious, given you were a student athlete, as you look back now, or if there's someone who's a current student athlete now, would you say anything to yourself back when you were starting as a freshman in terms of, making the most of it, or, keeping some sort of perspective on the relationships or what matters most?
I think I would say enjoy it. And it had been, just based on my experience having played prior to college, it was interesting. I had a number of different athletic opportunities in terms of where to play, which division, and so on. And I remember having a really hard time deciding between, there were some Division I schools where soccer would be even more of a commitment than it already was at Colby, which was a great Division III program. And I was having a really hard time navigating which school, like, am I going to make the right choice? And I mean, sidebar, it was really easy to decide on Colby. I'm still in denial that I graduated. I loved every minute. But when I was trying to make that decision, ultimately, I sat down with my parents and they said, listen, think about where you would want to be at school if, God forbid, you sustained a career-ending injury. And ask yourself if that's the school that you would want to be at absent a soccer career. And that really drove home what I thought my ultimate decision was going to be anyway. And luckily there were no, I still haven't had a cavity, knock on wood, so injury free, but it definitely made the experience all the more fulfilling because I felt like I was getting such a universal college experience. And it's interesting because you never really know who you're going to stay in touch with and who you aren't. I'm 47 now. I graduated in 1996. And there are teammates who I talk to very routinely, who I would say, numerous times a month, even though we all live throughout the country. And then there are friends and teammates of mine who I might talk to once or twice a year, or longer than that. And it never feels like we've skipped a beat. It's just been such an incredible way to experience not just college, but life. And the emphasis on team, I think it gets overused a lot, but it really, at the same time, the value of it really can't be underscored, because if you value it in one context, it's impossible not to do so in the other aspects of your life. And it also makes it pretty easy to sniff out people who aren't necessarily used to working as members of a team. And I think that's a valuable skill to be able to acquire as early on as possible.
Yeah. So you talked about it a little bit. You ended up going to Suffolk University for law school. I'm curious, when did law school come to your mind? And, was that, did you know going into Colby, or how did that come about? Okay.
I did. When I was in high school, I remember, I'm a chatterbox to begin with. I love to talk. So that's one thing I had going for me. But I remember distinctly my senior year, I was in my AP history class, and we were all taking turns debating different positions. And I remember standing up to discuss the topic I was assigned sort of on the fly, and feeling like this was something I was really meant to do. So it was, I would say, by my senior year in high school, I was set on attending law school. And that really navigated both the focus of my studies when I was at Colby. I double majored in political science, which is what people typically do if they anticipate attending law school, and American studies, which was so much fun because it had some overlap with the American government, but also psychology and English and American history. So really enjoyed that aspect of things.
Yeah. In terms of your law school experience, as if there's anybody that's currently in law school right now, is there anything that you look back on in terms of advice on making the most of it, finding internships, or
Yes.
things like that?
I think a lot of things in law school I learned on the fly. It was a very different environment from Colby, where I had very small class sizes, and especially in your first year of law school. And I don't know that it really matters where you attend, because a number of my friends and former colleagues who attended different law schools have shared a similar experience to what I had my first year. It's sort of a sink or swim mentality. And when you are used to being nurtured, fostered, checked in on, and this is also coming from someone who depended on a coach to really help her navigate successes in a lot of ways, you have to grow up quickly in that respect and realize that it's up to you and you alone to really take the initiative to make sure that you're doing everything that you need to be doing. I will also say that there's a feeling or a sense of, it's almost like I went through it, so you're going to go through it too mentality. That kind of a person. So I really don't think I tried to impose that on anybody who was a year or two younger than me in law school, but there's definitely sort of a rite of passage that a lot of people seem to take pride in, because they went through the ringer in all of these respects. And that for me was disarming, to be honest with you. I didn't love that aspect of law school. And, having gone to a school where there were so many kids who were very like-minded, you meet a whole different group of people. And it's not bad, it's not good, it's kind of a combination of both. And people who maybe don't value what it means to be on a team, who are really hyper focused on that solo experience of him or her, which I think is unproductive. But it sort of permeates, I think, just about anywhere I can think of, in a law school setting. Some people view it as a competition. I never did. I will also say it's okay to have fun in law school. My first year, my grades were, but I enjoyed living in Boston for the first time. I made great friends. And by second year, I really got the hang of it. And I said, okay, because I'm on the younger side for my class anyway. So when I started law school, I was the youngest, I think, in my class, or one of them. And, I had to grow up in that first year, living in a city for the first time, navigating all of the things that in college you really don't have to worry about. Every meal, my laundry. I mean, these sound small, but I continue to think that they're big, even at 47. And in terms of the experience, you don't have to know what area of law you want to focus on your first year. There are a couple of exceptions, such as perhaps intellectual property. That's a real hyper-focused area of law that if that's what you want to do, copywriting, licensing, that type of work, it's good to hit the ground running right away. I just knew that I wanted to advocate for people, and I didn't know in what context. I thought probably child advocacy. I love kids. I actually had a couple of internships in college that helped guide me to what I thought I might want to focus on in law school. And the best thing I did really was initiate and get involved in internships of a very wide variety. That helped me to further formulate what areas I wanted to focus on post-graduation. And the summer after your second year of law school, when people typically obtain summer associateships that can lead to a job following graduation, that's an important time for you to really think about perhaps what it is you want to do area-wise. The last thing I'll say is, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do post-graduation outside the litigation domain, I joined a law firm where I was an associate in a general litigation practice. So I was able to taste a lot of different flavors, if you will, of litigation. And from there, a couple of years in after that, I ended up focusing on contentious reinsurance, of all things.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I think you worked for 4 different firms over a 10-year period. Is there anything from, those years that you would pass on to someone just entering the field and, early in their career?
Yeah, I think the size of the law firm in many regards will determine your experience. If you're going to a large law firm, and this is based, it's been a number of years since I've been out, be prepared to research and write a lot. And it will seem mundane, but it will really help shape who you are as an advocate. So much of it comes down to the coach or the department head or the person that is in charge of overseeing your workload. And so open communication is really central. It's not easy to do when you're a first-year associate and you're talking to a partner. If you have questions about the scope of your work, there is nothing to be gained by just guessing, because you'll end up spinning your wheels unless you have a clear idea of what it is you're being asked to do. I also think as a more senior attorney, before I stepped away from the practice, I found it refreshing when junior associates would come to me and say, Dori, I'm not really sure where to start with this, or I think this is what's being asked of me, but I'm not really sure. That communication is daunting as an associate, but it makes you stronger. It helps you build resilience. And it also, frankly, when you're more senior and you're advocating in front of total strangers on behalf of a client, or you have to answer a question on the fly, it just makes you a better lawyer. And for someone who's getting overwhelmed with work, and this has happened to all of us, if I have somebody come in and give me an assignment and I have 3 others that are pending, that are time sensitive, I will say to that person, or did say to that person, and I always had a project list right handy next to me that was accessible. I would say, this sounds really interesting. I'd love to help you. What's your timeline on this? Because these are the projects that I'm currently working on that need to be addressed within X amount of time. Does that still work within your time frame? And getting that out at the very beginning, whether it's in an email or person to person, is valuable.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, around this time you met your husband. I'm curious, how was managing your personal life and professional life? I think today there's a big emphasis on professional life. Any pieces of advice there on finding the right person and partner?
So I married another lawyer, which made it in some ways very easy for us to both recognize if you have a deadline, if you have travel for a case, if you've got something that demands that your hours be crazy, that level of understanding and the lack of a need to explain yourself is already there. And that continues to be huge, because my husband is still a very successful practicing lawyer. And I know when he's in the thick of it, I don't take it personally. We're able as a family to plan around it. So that definitely was helpful. It's interesting because the area of law that I focused on is not a family friendly area. Litigation is, and I was working for, I don't think it really matters if you're working for a small, medium, or large firm. Everybody has billable hour requirements when you're younger. And when you're more senior, you also have the responsibility of bringing in new clients and keeping existing clients happy. So I think the area of law that you choose to embark on is significant, especially if you are thinking about your family planning, whether male or female. And for example, with respect to litigation, I knew, I had always known that if I had the option to choose, that I would choose to be home full time. And I don't love that expression, home full time, raising my kids full time, because every parent is raising their kids full time. So for lack of a better way to describe it, that's how I'm addressing it. But I knew even before having a conversation with my firm, and I didn't, because I knew I wanted to be home full time, but working 50 hours a week, which would be part-time, getting paid less than half of what I was earning before. And ultimately, if there's a status conference with the court on a Wednesday and you don't work Wednesdays, guess what? It doesn't matter. You're showing up.
Yeah.
So that lack of flexibility in litigation made it clear to me, if I had thought I wanted to make it work in either a part-time or full-time basis, that at least with respect to my family, it wouldn't work. And there are definitely other areas of law that are much more family friendly, that don't have those emergent issues that have to be dealt with So something for people to consider if they are certain or believe that they want to continue or need to continue practicing law throughout all the different phases of their family planning, if you will.
Yeah. As you said, you made a decision to, walk away from law. I'm curious, how tough was that, or was that pretty easy, once your child was born? Or you talk to us about, I think that's something a lot of women who might be listening to this might debate as they get close to motherhood.
Well, I'll tell you that I negotiate more now than I ever did as a lawyer with 3 kids. It's funny, as especially my oldest, who's 13, is talking about what she might want to do when she grows up. I have in the back of my mind, I would love all 3 of my kids to go to law school, but I don't know how much, depending on the area of law that they were to focus on, I would say, jump into it. And it's because it's really, really, really important and difficult to find a way to balance everything as an attorney and as a mother and as a wife. And God forbid you have other activities or hobbies that you want to embark on.
Yep.
It's not to say that it can't be done, but my interpretation is people talk about, especially for women, how do you have it all? My version of having it all has been being able to focus not singularly, but primarily on one different domain or area of my life at a time. So when I was practicing law, I was working 90-hour weeks. I was traveling all over the world. I was enjoying meeting all sorts of new people and getting incredible work experience. And as a mother and a wife, I'm enjoying this, chapter of having the flexibility that I didn't have before to take on different things in those roles. I will say that I use my law degree regularly. I am, as an artist, which is not necessarily the background that you would associate with, an artist who was a lawyer. I find my legal background to be a key component to how I'm able to organize my business, how I'm able to advocate for myself, pitch things, the writing that's involved, and there is a lot of writing involved. I think my legal background has been invaluable as an artist. So it never goes away, if you will. You can always use your legal background, and you do. Even if it's disputing a gym membership or talking to your insurance company after you've suffered a loss. Once people know that you are an attorney, then there is a heightened level of credibility, right or wrong, that makes it less likely that someone will take advantage of you.
Yeah. As you said, you have 3 kids. Is there any advice you would give to someone on becoming a parent or motherhood or any of those topics?
So it's funny, when I was pregnant with my first, and actually with all 3, I got all sorts of unsolicited advice about parenting. It's very daunting when that happens. But I think the best piece of advice I could give to anyone is the best mom, the best dad, the best parent isn't about which diaper you choose or which formula you use. Did you breastfeed? Did you bottle feed? How many activities are they involved in? The best parent is the one who's saying, am I making the right choice? Just being concerned about doing right by your child, having that kind of dedication is going to take you through. And it sounds a little fluffy, but it's true. There are so many choices for parents to make these days. Um, Doing what you think is right and best for your child really is the best default. You can't go wrong.
Yeah. So, as we talked about, at some point, during this period, art gets into your mind. Can you talk about, how it got into what you were doing and, how the formation of Gallery of Good started?
It's funny. A couple of things happened around the time I described. I was thinking about formalizing the company. We have a lovely cafe around the corner from where we used to live, Cafe Olay, right in the heart of Gallery Row in Philadelphia. And the owner rotates up and coming artists every few months on her walls. And she saw during my daily visit for my 2 mochas, she saw that I was just leafing through some pictures that I had done. And she said, "Why aren't you on my walls?" And this is, pre-formation of the Gallery of Good. And I didn't have an intelligent response. So she said, "How about you're the next one?" And it was a couple of months away. So that was great. And then it was within a week or two, my younger daughter, who at the time was in first grade, we were having her parent teacher conference in the fall. And up until that point, and this is well before the pre-COVID restrictions were in place, I habitually would visit the school as a guest, and we would do different projects with the kids. And I was always ultimately drawing something. And the kids would inevitably form near London's desk and say, "Mrs. Broudy, will you draw me this or will you draw me that?" And so at the time that we had her parent-teacher conference with Mrs. Giasio, who I always give a shout out to because she's wonderful, Mrs. Giasio and I were talking about how well London was doing. And at the end, she said, "Now I know that this is supposed to be about London, but Dori, I think I need to tell you, I think you're a very talented artist and you should really take this to the next level." And I'm like, "Yes, Mrs. Giasio," like it's my conference. And those two things together really served as a catalyst for me to take things to where they started with the Gallery of Good. And having been a lawyer for so long and having a business card and an office and the BlackBerry, I know I'm dating myself, I felt like if I'm going to do this, I need to do 2 things right away after I build a little bit more of a portfolio. I need business cards and I need a website. So I worked with my dear friend, who's also a former lawyer and web developer, Louisa Chen. And she and I designed the website. I've got to give her absolutely the lion's share of credit for it. So the website was built, and I went down the street to the Papery in Philadelphia, which is wonderful, and ordered the most beautiful business cards I could imagine. And those 2 things gave me a feeling of instant credibility. So being an artist, yes, but here's my business card, here's my website. And those 2 things really, I think, were a catalyst for the confidence that I had pretty early on in how successful the company would be.
Yeah. I'm curious, finding your style, or how did you develop that?
Well, I love color. So I knew there wasn't going to be anything neutral about what I was making. And I really wanted to speak about themes that were universal in nature. It actually started out not with hearts, which are such a large part of my portfolio, but with dresses. Dresses that I would draw for my girls, like fairy tale dresses almost. And the collection is actually called Successes of Dresses. And what it is, there's a wide range of different designs that I created. And each piece doesn't just have a name, but it also has a positive characteristic that we're trying to, as parents, Josh and I, instill in our kids. And that's a good example of how just about everything, not just about everything that I do in the art world is a projection of me as a parent. That's why there are so many hearts and rainbows and themes that emphasize equity and access and understanding. So there are numerous pieces that I've done where I started and I just really couldn't stop because it was such a cathartic process for me. Just about everything that I've done has been done alongside my kids at some point too. They all think I have dot-itis, they call it, by the way, because I have so many dots in a lot of my work. And they're right. I do. I have dot-itis.
Yeah. I'm curious, being a lawyer is very, by the rules, and there's a lot of prestige and respect to it. And, starting, you know, trying to be, an artist in your 40s, I'm sure, the parents of, your kids as friends were, they probably, whether they were saying anything to you or not, there might have been some judgment there.
Yeah.
I'm curious, there might be a lot of people in their 40s that are looking at you and like, I mean, at least I should pursue a hobby, if I have one or I haven't looked at. Uh, did you deal with, did you think about judgment a lot in, or like the first time you know, published to your personal network,
Yeah.
that you have a website? Was there a lot of anxiety?
It's funny, the anxiety that I have experienced with respect to, introducing myself to the world as an artist really comes down to, when you're on a legal team, you're on a team, right? You're every success, every failure, every advancement, every setback is experienced by, it's never just, it doesn't come down to one person. And so even though it's very high pressure work, the result of whatever your efforts are shared. And when you're an artist and you're introducing your work, especially when it seems like a 180 degree from what people previously knew you as, I find it far more daunting and intimidating to be an artist than I ever did being an attorney. And I can't think of a situation as an attorney that was more intimidating than introducing my work to people for the first time in the art world, because someone's response, I'm singularly responsible for however somebody's responding to the work. And I know people aren't supposed to care what other people think about their art. I do. I care about it. I want people to enjoy it. I want them to respect it. I want them to enjoy it. And I want them to talk about it in a way that would make me, happy. And that makes them happy, more importantly. It's funny, when it comes to people's response to me starting the art firm, none of my lawyer friends in Philly and New York ever knew me as an artist. I mean, I never demonstrated that part of my life or my skill set because there wasn't a lot of room for it in the practice of law. I don't think the judge necessarily would have enjoyed some hearts on the side of a brief that I was filing. So we kept that to the side. But what amazed me and really continues to amaze me is nobody said, "Are you sure? Like, really? Art?" I mean, this level of support I immediately received and continue to feel has been amazing. And a lot of my clients are former colleagues. When I get accolades or shout outs, they're in large part, they're celebrating it with me and for me. So, I think that's really a testament to the people that I worked with when I was practicing law. It's actually reconnected a number of us, which has been great. I received more, by far, more judgment or any judgment when I was making the decision to transition from practicing law to stepping away from the practice of law to be home with our daughter. And it was almost always women, interestingly, who questioned the decision. I don't think their intentions were ill. I think, but they did feel emboldened to say, you're really throwing away a successful career. Is this something you really want to do? And I came to the conclusion that those kinds of comments were far less about my decision and perhaps part of their own level of self-reflection or a projection of something that maybe they're going through. And I was able to confidently walk away from those conversations knowing that I'm still making the right choice for myself and for our family.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. In terms of you have cards, you have fine stationery, you have mugs, you have building blocks. Like how did that develop to think of different lineups like that?
It's a great question. It all started out as a pure illustration. And I originally anticipated that it would be a focus on framed and unframed art prints. And then, and the foundation of that is that whatever I produce has to be produced in the United States. And if at all possible, hyper locally within my, within the greater Philadelphia area. So that is always a reason why I'm able to or not able to pursue a particular presentation of the artwork, if you will. People just started asking for card versions of the artwork, and the artwork's expensive, and I want people to be able to enjoy it at various different price points. So the fine paper collection came out probably about a little less than a year after I started with the framed and unframed art prints. And what I would hear from people, which has made me so happy, is that if they purchase the cards, they either didn't want to give them away like they were supposed to, or they would frame them if they received them. And all of those are actually made around the corner from where my husband and I used to live in Philadelphia at Marathon Print. So keeping it hyper local again just felt great. The acrylic blocks were a tricky conversion to pin down because so much of that type of work is created outside the United States. And I knew I wanted the highest level of quality. As with any of the pieces, I knew I wanted it to be a minimum of a 1-inch thickness and a diamond cut, like gallery grade piece. And I wanted it to have like a special protective coating on the back. And Bumblejack's, which is a boutique studio in Seattle, Washington, nails it every time. It took months and months of researching, but it was another way for people who either maybe don't have wall space or want something for their desk or something, as a collection that they could enjoy. The mugs and the other presentations have been trickier because they have to be, as I said, made in the US. And I have found companies that will do that. But I've stepped away, at least for the time being. I'm really focusing on the prints, the cards, the acrylic blocks, and actually focusing a lot on my newest presentation, which is the NFT portfolio.
Yeah. I'm curious, for creatives, it can be kind of hard to set goals. How do you set goals for yourself?
A lot of it requires flexibility. I, for example, never thought I would be a retail partner selling wholesale. That is such a large part of what I now do. I think in order to set goals, you do have to do sort of these self check-ins or have someone that you trust, one or more people that you trust, who you can start out with, if at all possible, at the beginning of your journey, to communicate with about your short and long-term goals, with the understanding that you're not going to be able to anticipate everything short or long term. For me, setting goals has been a collaborative effort. I mean, I have luckily a great supportive husband, but I have business partners who will come to me and say, this is what I'm looking for. Is this something that interests you? You know, it's resulted in commissioned projects and I will say this, because everything I do is mission driven. I think it's really important now more than ever for anyone who's starting any kind of business to figure out a way that they can incorporate helping other people or organizations while embarking on their own professional endeavors. When you start out doing that and it becomes built into your business model, it feels great. It really does. But the relationships you're able to form with people, maybe you're not having financially the month or the quarter that you expected, but you're getting feedback from people or organizations who were supported by the work that you've done to date. There's always that level of, reward that you're not supposed to look for. You shouldn't, try to help other people so you get rewarded for it or recognized for it, but it helps. It really does help.
Yeah. In terms of your creative process, I'm curious, how do you come up with your collections of series, or is that just, just mood dependent, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to just, do dresses for success, or how does that work?
So it's always something coming to me from the standpoint of being a parent. But with that includes things that are current events, often determine in large part what it is I'm looking to do. There was a point when I created an American flag called Celebrate the Many Colors of America. And I created that. It looks red, white, and blue from afar, but as you look closer, it's got many, many, many different colors incorporated therein. And I created that when it seemed increasingly discouraging that diversity wasn't being celebrated in all of its different forms in this country. So there are definitely instances where that's driving the design or the theme of the work. I really also want to be able to give people sort of a respite from the heaviness of our times. And so a lot of what I'm doing just continues to focus on the positive, not shielded to the things that need improvement, but helping to lift somebody up, during a particularly dark time, I suppose.
Yeah. You mentioned it a little bit, but do you want to talk about the NFT you're working on and how that's been going?
I'm excited to talk about the NFTs, so thank you. I am in the process of curating my first NFT collection, which is a combination of illustrations and hand-generated generative pieces that are part of my portfolio. I've been working really hard with amazing people, doing a lot of research because it's a daunting subject matter for a lot of people, and it's ever evolving. So no one is really an expert, if you will. But my first collection, which will be out this spring on OpenSea, is a collection of 17 pieces 17 pieces because that was my soccer number in college. And it's sort of a recognition of the fact that soccer continues to lend itself so well to the experiences that I'm able to undertake because of the leadership and the strength and confidence that I achieved through soccer. And every one of those 17 pieces will be supporting one of 17 different philanthropic organizations. So it's really, I guess, minting with a mission, you would say. And I can't wait for people to see it. I've been incredibly fortunate to work with amazing people who are experts in this field in terms of the technical aspects of determining your platform, how to mint, crypto wallet building, and also what adds value to an NFT. And I think that's something a lot of people continue to struggle with because of how abstract it is. But yeah, I'll keep you posted, but we're looking at early spring.
Yeah. As you look at your art journey, is there something you would have said to your 2018 self, or is there something you would say to someone thinking about starting their own art journey, whether it's on the side or to eventually become a full-time?
I've heard so many people say that they're daunted by the prospect of entering the art world because their day job, if you will, is so different and distinguishable from the art world. And I would really say to anyone and everyone, whether you realize it or not, there is at least one thing, probably many, many more, that are takeaways from your current professional endeavors that you will, whether you realize it or not, apply and will make you an even better artist. It doesn't mean that your subject matter will be, or your technique will improve necessarily. Maybe it will. But whether it's negotiating, people skills, the business operations, whatever you're doing now, I guarantee you will provide an incredible amount of background and support for you that many people don't have the luxury or the benefit of having. So be encouraged by that. Don't be discouraged by it.
Yeah. Dori, we talked about a good amount. Was there something you wanted to talk about that we haven't?
My gosh, I feel like I talked your ear off. So I don't know.
No, that's the point.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I have found to be particularly gratifying as an artist, and I think this applies to whatever profession you're in, is when you try to figure out a way to do things in the way that makes you comfortable. I've been told by many a person, you don't do things the way artists normally do, or, in terms of how I've grown the company, it's not traditional. And so I would say, but it's worked very well. There's something liberating about not having been a formally trained artist, having gone to art school and been told this is how it progresses. Something very empowering about being able to do what you think is the right thing to do at the time you think it's best to act. And it's, I've been very blessed that it's succeeded and just continues to grow because of that. I would, in some, just trust your instincts and take that leap.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great advice. Well, Dori, I just want to acknowledge you and thank you. If people want to, follow you or support you, what's the best way to do that?
There are a couple of different ways. And first, thank you so much for having me. It really has been a pleasure to speak with you. My website, which is my full name, DoriDesautelBroudy.com. Instagram tends to be the most up to date, if you will, in terms of my projects. And that again is Dori Desautel Broudy, all one word. And then I have similar links that are available on LinkedIn, which ironically was my first social media platform because I started my account when I was a lawyer.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dori, I just want to thank you for being on. It was awesome learning about, your soccer journey, your law journey, and then becoming a full-time mom, and then pursuing your art journey. I think a lot of people in your situation wouldn't have pursued the art journey out of fear of, people judging them or thinking they're crazy. And so I give you a lot of credit, and you found a lot of success, and it's awesome to see that, and for everything that you sell, for some portion of the proceeds to go to a charitable organization. That's awesome. And just to emphasize goodness in this time is great. So thank you for being on.
Oh, it was great to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you.